The unexpected encounter, Emma Carter gripped the cold metal pole as the 9:47 p.m. express train from downtown Seattle swayed gently on its tracks. Her worn canvas messenger bag hung heavy on her shoulder, containing everything she owned that mattered. Her sketchbook filled with dress designs, a thermos of instant coffee, and exactly $17 in crumpled bills that had to last until Friday. The day had been brutal, even by her standards. 6 a.m. at the bakery, kneading dough and serving. Rushed commuters who barely looked at her. Then straight to the bookstore for the afternoon shift. Helping customers find their literary escapes while she dreamed of her own. Finally, for hours at the art supply store, watching other artists buy materials she could only dream of affording. As the train pulled away from the station, Emma found a seat in the nearly empty car. Her reflection in the window showed the toll of her schedule, auburn hair escaping from its messy ponytail, clothes clean but clearly secondhand, and eyes that had once sparkled with dreams, now shadowed with exhaustion. 3 seats ahead sat a man who seemed completely out of place on the late-night commuter train. David Harrison, though Emma didn't know his name yet, was dressed in an expensive charcoal suit that fit him perfectly. At 29, he had built Harrison Industries from a small tech startup into a multinational corporation. But tonight, he looked like any other tired businessman. David had chosen the train over his usual private car service because he needed the anonymity, the chance to think without his assistant scheduling every minute. Something about the young woman who had just boarded caught his attention. The careful way she moved, how she guarded her possessions. Speaking to a kind of vigilance he recognized from his own humble beginnings. Emma's eyelids grew heavier with each passing mile. She tried every trick she knew to stay awake. But the warmth of the train and the gentle swaying motion were working against her determination. Her head began to nod forward, then snap back up as she fought against sleep. David found himself, watching her struggle, recognizing something familiar in her quiet desperation. He remembered his own early days, working multiple jobs while trying to build his first company. The bone-deep exhaustion that came from believing that stopping meant failing. The inevitable finally happened. Emma's head drifted to the side, coming to rest against David's shoulder as she succumbed to exhaustion. For a moment, David was surprised by the gentle weight of this stranger's trust. Most people who knew his identity approached him with calculated interest, but this woman had simply needed a place to rest. David carefully adjusted his position to make her more comfortable, noting how young she looked in sleep, how the worry lines around her eyes softened when she wasn't conscious of the world's demands. He found himself studying her face, wondering what circumstances had led her to this moment of such complete exhaustion. The train continued its journey through the night, stopping at various stations. Other passengers got on and off, but David remained perfectly still, unwilling to disturb the sleeping woman beside him. An hour passed, then another. The train began to slow as it approached Emma's stop in Bellevue, but she remained deeply asleep against his shoulder. David heard the conductor announce the station, watched other passengers gather their belongings and prepare to disembark, but Emma didn't stir. He'd faced a choice: wake her up and send her on her way, or let her continue sleeping and see what the night might bring. Looking down at her peaceful face, David made an impulsive decision that would change both their lives forever. He remained seated as the train pulled away from her stop, carrying them both toward an uncertain destination. Something about this woman, this moment, felt significant in a way he couldn't explain. Perhaps it was the reminder of his own struggles. Or perhaps it was simply the human connection he hadn't realized he was missing. The train continued into the night, carrying a billionaire and a struggling artist toward a future neither of them could have imagined. As the city lights blurred past the windows, David found himself thinking about the choices that had brought him to this moment. Despite all his success and wealth, the most meaningful thing that had happened to him in months was providing comfort to a tired stranger. There was something profound about the simple act of being needed, not for his money or influence, but simply for his presence. The train rolled on through the darkness, carrying 2 people from different worlds toward a destination that would prove to be just the beginning of their story. Waking up in a different world, Emma woke slowly, consciousness returning like gentle waves. The first thing she noticed was warmth. Comfortable cocoon that felt nothing like her usual awakening in the cramped studio apartment she shared. With her roommate, the second thing she noticed was silence. Not the usual symphony of traffic and construction noise that typically greeted her mornings in downtown Seattle. Her eyes fluttered open to reveal an unfamiliar ceiling painted in soft cream colors, with elegant crown molding that spoke of wealth and refinement. Panic shot through her system like electricity as she bolted upright in what appeared to be the most luxurious bed she had ever seen. The room around her was spacious and beautifully appointed, with tall windows draped in silk curtains that filtered morning sunlight into a golden glow. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs as she tried to piece together how she had ended up in this place. The last clear memory she had was boarding the late train home, settling into her seat with her messenger bag clutched protectively against her chest. She was still wearing her clothes from the previous day, which provided some small comfort, but her canvas bag was nowhere to be seen. Emma swung her legs over the side of the massive bed, her bare feet sinking into carpet so plush it felt like walking on clouds. This was definitely not her world, not anywhere she belonged or could afford to be. A soft knock at the door made her freeze completely. Before she could respond, a distinguished-looking man in his 50s entered, carrying a silver tray laden with what appeared to be a gourmet breakfast. His manner was professional but kind, and he seemed unsurprised to find her awake and obviously disoriented. "Good morning, Miss Carter," he said, setting the tray on a nearby table. "I'm Robert Chen, Mr. Harrison's assistant. I hope you slept well. Mr. Harrison asked me to bring you breakfast and to let you know that your bag is safe. He's waiting downstairs when you're ready to speak with him." Emma stared at the man, trying to process his words. Harrison, the name was familiar, though she couldn't immediately place why. "I don't understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Where am I? How did I get here?" Robert's expression was patient and understanding. "You're at Mr. Harrison's estate? In Medina. You fell asleep on the train last night, and when you didn't wake at your stop, he made the decision to bring you here rather than leave you alone on public transportation. He was concerned for your safety." Explanation should have been reassuring, but Emma felt more confused than ever. Who was this Mr. Harrison, and why would a stranger care enough about her safety to bring her to what was obviously a very expensive home? "I need to leave," Emma said, standing abruptly. "I have to get to work. People are counting on me, and I can't afford to lose another job." Robert nodded understandingly. "Yes. Mr. Harrison anticipated that you might be concerned about your work obligations. He took the liberty of calling your employers this morning to explain that you had a family emergency and would be delayed. Your jobs are secure." Emma stared at him in shock. "He called my employers? How did he even know where I work?" The violation of her privacy, however well-intentioned, made her feel exposed and vulnerable in a way that was deeply uncomfortable. "Your work schedule was written in a notebook in your bag," Robert explained gently. "Mr. Harrison wanted to ensure you wouldn't face any consequences for something that wasn't your fault. He meant no harm by it." Before Emma could respond, another voice spoke from the doorway. "I hope Robert explained everything clearly. I know the situation must be confusing and probably frightening." Emma turned to see a man in his late 20s. Standing in the entrance to the room, he was tall and lean, with dark hair and kind eyes that seemed genuinely concerned about her well-being. He was dressed casually in jeans and a simple button-down shirt, but even his casual clothes looked expensive. Something about him seemed familiar, though she was certain they had never met. "You're Mr. Harrison," she said, more a statement than a question. "David," he corrected, stepping into the room, but maintaining a respectful distance. "And you're Emma Carter. I found your identification in your bag when I was looking for emergency contact information." Emma studied his face, trying to reconcile this seemingly normal, considerate man with the obvious wealth that surrounded them. "Why did you help me?" "People don't just take strangers home because they fall asleep on trains." David was quiet for a moment, considering how to answer honestly. "I'm not entirely sure myself." He looked so exhausted, so completely worn out. "When you didn't wake up at your stop, I couldn't bring myself to just shake you awake and send you out into the night alone. Something about the situation felt wrong." "But you don't know anything about me," Emma protested. "I could be anyone. I could be dangerous." A small smile played at the corners of David's mouth. Somehow I doubt that. Besides, you were the one who was vulnerable, not me. You fell asleep trusting a complete stranger not to harm you. That kind of unconscious trust says something about your character. Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks as the full implications of the situation hit her. She had fallen asleep on this man's shoulder, had trusted him completely without even knowing. His name, the thought was both embarrassing and strangely touching. I should go, she said again, though with less conviction than before. I don't belong in a place like this. Why not? David asked. And the simplicity of the question caught her off guard. Because ... Emma gestured around the opulent room. Look at this place. Look at me. I work 3 jobs just to afford a studio apartment with a roommate. I buy my clothes at thrift stores and eat peanut butter sandwiches for lunch. This, she waved her hand at the luxury surrounding them, this isn't my world. David moved closer, his expression serious. What if I told you it doesn't have to be that way? What if I could offer you something better? Emma's guard went up immediately. In her experience, when wealthy men offered struggling women something better, it rarely came without strings attached. What kind of offer? A job, David said simply. A real job, with benefits and a salary that would allow you to focus on one career instead of juggling 3. Doing what? Emma asked suspiciously. Being my personal assistant? Robert has been handling that role along with his other duties, but the company has grown to the point where I need someone dedicated to managing my schedule, correspondence, and personal affairs. Emma stared at him, looking for the catch that she was certain must exist. Why me? You don't know anything about my qualifications or experience. I know you're intelligent, David said. I saw your notebook, your budget calculations, the way you organize your schedule to maximize every hour. I know you're reliable because you work 3 jobs without letting any of them down. I know you're trustworthy because Robert did a background check this morning and you've never so much as received a parking ticket. You ran a background check on me? Emma's voice rose in indignation. For your protection as much as mine, David said quickly. I brought a stranger into my home. I needed to verify that you were who you appeared to be, just as I'm sure you'd like to verify that I'm not some kind of predator. Emma had to admit he had a point, but the whole situation still felt surreal. Even if I believed you were serious about this job offer, I still don't understand why you're doing this. What do you get out of it? David looked at her for a long moment, and Emma saw something vulnerable in his expression. Maybe the chance to remember what it feels like to do something good without expecting anything in return. Maybe the opportunity to help someone who reminds me of who I used to be before I became so focused on success that I forgot why I started in the first place. There was something in his voice, a sincerity that made Emma's defenses waver. She looked around the beautiful room again, then back at this man who had literally carried her sleeping form to safety when he could have just as easily walked away. I need time to think, she said finally. This is all happening too fast. Of course, David said. Take all the time you need. Robert will show you around the house if you'd like, and there are clothes in the closet that should fit you. We can discuss the details of the job offer later if you decide you're interested. As David left the room, Emma sank back onto the bed, her mind racing. Part of her wanted to run back to her familiar life of struggle and uncertainty. But another part, the part that had been holding on to dreams for so long, whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was the break she had been waiting for. Looking out the window at the manicured gardens and sparkling water in the distance, Emma realized that her life had just taken a turn she never could have imagined. The question now was whether she was brave enough to see where it would lead. The proposal 2 weeks had passed since Emma had accepted David's job offer, and her life had transformed in ways she was still trying to process. Living in the guest house on David's estate, she had her own space for the first time in years. A beautiful apartment with a view of Lake Washington that took her breath away every morning. The work was challenging but fulfilling. David was demanding but fair. Emma found herself genuinely enjoying the responsibility of managing his complex schedule and correspondence. More importantly, she had been able to quit her 3 exhausting jobs and focus on something that actually utilized her organizational skills and intelligence. But perhaps the most unexpected development was the growing connection between her and David. What had started as a professional relationship had evolved into something deeper. They found themselves lingering over morning coffee, discussing everything from business strategies to childhood memories. David had even converted a small room in the main house into an art studio for Emma, encouraging her to pursue her design dreams. Emma was working late in her office, reviewing contracts for David's upcoming merger. When she heard a soft knock on the door, David entered carrying 2 cups of tea and wearing an expression that seemed both nervous and determined. "I thought you might need a break," he said, setting 1 cup on her desk. "You've been working for 12 hours straight?" Emma looked up from her papers, pushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "The Morrison deal needs to be finalized by tomorrow morning. I want to make sure everything is perfect." "Emma," David said, sitting down across from her, "there's something I need to tell you, something I've been trying to find the courage to say for days now." Something in his tone made Emma set down her pen and give him her full attention. "What is it?" David took a deep breath. "These past 2 weeks have been the happiest I've felt in years. Not because of any business success or financial gain, but because of you. Because of having someone in my life who sees me as more than just a bank account or a business opportunity." Emma's heart began to race. "David, I know this is complicated," he continued, his voice earnest. "I know that I'm your employer and that there's a power imbalance here that makes this difficult. But I can't pretend anymore that what I feel for you is purely professional." Emma stared at him, her mind reeling. She had felt the growing attraction between them, had caught herself looking forward to their daily conversations more than she should have. But she had convinced herself that she was imagining things, that someone like David Harrison could never be interested in someone like her. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. David stood up and moved around the desk, kneeling beside her chair. "You don't have to say anything right now. But I want you to know that my feelings for you have nothing to do with gratitude or pity or some kind of savior complex. I love your intelligence, your determination, the way you light up when you talk about your designs. I love that you're not impressed by my money or my status. I love that you fell asleep on my shoulder that night and trusted me to take care of you." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "David, I care about you too. More than I should. More than I expected to. But this is all so overwhelming. A month ago I was struggling to pay rent. And now you're telling me you love me in a house that costs more than I'll make in a lifetime?" "The house doesn't matter," David said, reaching for her hands. "None of this matters if you're not here to share it with me. Emma, I know this is sudden, but I also know that life is unpredictable. A month ago I was a workaholic who had convinced himself that business success was enough. Then you came into my life and everything changed." Emma looked down at their joined hands, feeling the warmth of his skin against hers. "What are you asking me?" David was quiet for a moment, then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Emma's breath caught in her throat as he opened it, revealing a stunning but elegant diamond ring. "I'm asking you to marry me," he said simply. "I know it's crazy, I know it's too soon. But I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to support your dreams, to be there for you the way you've been there for me. I want to build something real with you, something that has nothing to do with money or status, and everything to do with love." Emma stared at the ring, her heart pounding so hard she was sure David could hear it. "I don't know if I'm ready for this marriage, this lifestyle, being married to someone like you. It's all so far from anything I ever imagined for myself." "I'm not asking you to change who you are," David said gently. "I'm asking you to be who you are, but with me. You can take this as slow as you need. You can have a long engagement, a small wedding, whatever makes you comfortable. I just want to know that you're willing to try, that you believe in us enough to see where this could go." Emma looked into his eyes, seeing the vulnerability there, the genuine love that had somehow grown between them despite all the obstacles. She thought about the girl who had fallen asleep on a stranger's shoulder, exhausted and hopeless. She thought about the woman she had become in just 2 weeks, confident and cared for and full of possibilities. "Yes," she whispered, and then louder, "Yes, I'll marry you." David's face lit up with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger, It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. He stood up and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that made her forget all her doubts and fears. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. "I love you so much." "I love you too," Emma replied, surprising herself with how easily the words came. "I love you too." As they held each other in the soft lamplight of her office, Emma realized that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories really did begin with the simplest acts of kindness. She had trusted a stranger on a train, and that trust had led her to a love she never could have imagined. The ring on her finger caught the light, sparkling like the tears of joy in her eyes. In just 1 month, her entire life had been transformed. She had gone from borrowing a seat on a train to being offered a place at the table of someone who loved her exactly as she was. "When do you want to get married?" David asked, stroking her hair. Emma smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. "Soon," she said. "I don't want to wait to start our life together." David pulled back to look at her, his eyes shining. "Are you sure? I don't want you to feel pressured." "I'm sure," Emma said, and she meant it. "I'm ready to stop running from good things just because they seem too good to be true." As they planned their future together, Emma marveled at how dramatically her life had changed. She had gone from surviving day to day to planning a lifetime with the man she loved. It was more than she had ever dared to dream, and yet it felt absolutely right. The scared, exhausted girl who had fallen asleep on a train was gone. In her place was a woman who had learned to trust in love and second chances, and in the power of unexpected kindness to transform everything. The wedding preparations the next 3 months passed in a whirlwind of wedding preparations and deepening love. Emma had insisted on a small, intimate ceremony, wanting to focus on the meaning rather than the spectacle. David had readily agreed, understanding that simplicity was more important to her than grandeur. Emma had chosen to design and make her own wedding dress, a decision that had filled her with both excitement and anxiety. Working in the art studio David had created for her, she spent countless hours sketching, cutting, and sewing, creating something that was uniquely hers. The dress was elegant but not ostentatious, flowing silk with delicate beading that caught the light like stars. "You don't have to do this yourself," David had said one evening, finding her hunched over her sewing machine at midnight. "We could hire the best designer in the city." Emma had looked up at him, pins between her teeth and fabrics scattered around her. "I know," she said, smiling, "but I want to. It's important to me. I want to walk down the aisle wearing something I created with my own hands." David had kissed the top of her head, understanding without need for further explanation. This was about more than just a dress. It was about Emma reclaiming her identity as an artist, proving to herself that she could create something beautiful. The guest list was small, but meaningful. Emma's parents, who had driven up from Oregon, still seemed stunned by the sudden turn their daughter's life had taken. They had worried about her for years, watching her struggle to make ends meet while pursuing her dreams.
Oh.
They saw her happy and loved, and their initial concern about the speed of the relationship had given way to genuine affection for David. "He looks at you like you're the only person in the room," Emma's mother had said during one of their wedding planning sessions. "That's how you know it's real." David's side of the family was more complicated. His parents had passed away when he was young, and he had built his fortune largely alone. But his close friends from his early startup days were there, along with Robert, who had become like a father figure to him. The wedding was planned for a Saturday afternoon in late autumn. In the gardens of David's estate, Emma had chosen to have the ceremony by the lake, where she had spent so many mornings drinking coffee and marveling at how much her life had changed. The week before the wedding, Emma was putting the finishing touches on her dress when she received an unexpected visitor. Linda, her former roommate, had driven over from Seattle to see her. "I can't believe this is really happening," Linda said, looking around the guest house that Emma was still calling home until after the wedding. 6 months ago, you were eating ramen noodles for dinner and wondering how you were going to make rent. Now you're marrying a billionaire." Emma looked up from her sewing, hearing something in Linda's voice that made her pause. "You think I'm making a mistake?" Linda was quiet for a moment, then sat down across from Emma. "I think you're incredibly lucky, but I also think you need to be careful. Men like David Harrison don't usually marry women like us without expecting something in return. David isn't like that, Emma said, but she could hear the defensive edge in her own voice. I hope not, Linda said gently. I really do. But Emma, promise me you'll keep being yourself. Don't let all of this, she gestured around the luxurious space, change who you are at your core. Emma considered her friend's words long after. Linda had left. Was she changing? Had the comfort and security of her new life made her forget where she came from? She looked at her reflection in the mirror, seeing the woman she had become, confident, well-dressed, no longer carrying the weight of constant financial worry. But underneath, she was still the same person who had dreams bigger than her circumstances, who had worked 3 jobs without complaint, who had fallen asleep trusting a stranger. The difference was that now she had someone who believed in those dreams as much as she did. The night before the wedding, Emma couldn't sleep. She stood on the balcony of her apartment, looking out at the lake and thinking about the journey that had brought her here. Tomorrow, she would become Mrs. David Harrison, and her life would change in ways she was still learning to understand. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find David standing there, looking as restless as she felt. I know it's bad luck to see the bride before the wedding, he said, but I needed to talk to you. Emma let him in, and they sat together on her couch, the space between them charged with anticipation and nervous energy. Are you having second thoughts? David asked, studying her face. No, Emma said, and she meant it, but I'm scared. Not of marrying you, but of everything that comes with it. The media attention, the social expectations, the responsibility of being married to someone so successful. What if I can't handle it? David took her hands in his. Emma, listen to me. I'm not marrying you because I need a corporate wife or a social hostess. I'm marrying you because I love the woman who fell asleep on my shoulder, who works harder than anyone I've ever known, who lights up when she talks about her designs. That woman is enough, exactly as she is. But what if I disappoint you? What if I'm not sophisticated enough for your world? My world is whatever world you're in, David said simply. You could never disappoint me. You're the strongest, most genuine person I've ever met. You've already changed my life in ways you don't even realize. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. I love you so much. Sometimes I can't believe this is real. It's real, David said, pulling her close. Tomorrow, we're going to stand in front of our families and friends and promise to love each other for the rest of our lives. And then we're going to have the most amazing adventure together. Promise me something, Emma said, looking into his eyes. Promise me we'll never forget how we started. That night on the train when you could have just woken me up and sent me on my way, but you chose kindness instead. Promise me we'll always choose kindness. I promise, David said, sealing it with a kiss. As they held each other, Emma felt her fears melting away. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, and a new chapter in her life. But tonight, she was simply a woman in love with a man who had seen something worth protecting in her vulnerability. The scared, exhausted girl who had fallen asleep on a stranger's shoulder was ready to become a wife, partner, and whatever else the future held. She had learned to trust and love, and tomorrow she would make that trust official. Looking at David, Emma realized that she had found something she had never even known she was looking for, someone who loved her not for who she might become, but for who she already was. In a world that often felt cold and indifferent, she had found her home in the warmth of unexpected kindness. Tomorrow, she would walk down the aisle in a dress she had made with her own hands, toward a man who had changed her life with a single act of compassion. It was more than she had ever dared to dream, and yet it felt absolutely right. The wedding was only hours away, and Emma Carter was ready to become Emma Harrison. The wedding and new beginning, the morning of the wedding dawned clear and crisp, with autumn leaves creating a golden carpet across the estate grounds. Emma woke early, her heart racing with excitement and nervousness. Today was the day she had been dreaming about for months, the day she would marry David Harrison. She had breakfast with her parents in the guest house, her mother fussing over her while her father sat quietly, still adjusting to the magnitude of the changes in his daughter's life. They had arrived 3 days earlier, and Emma had watched with amusement as her practical, down-to-earth parents tried to navigate the world of luxury that had become her new normal. You look different, her mother said, studying Emma's face as she helped her into her wedding dress. Not just happy, but peaceful, like you finally found where you belong. Emma looked at herself in the mirror, seeing the woman she had become. The dress she had created fit perfectly, the silk flowing around her like water, the delicate beading catching the morning light. But it was more than the dress. There was something in her eyes, a confidence and joy that hadn't been there before. I have found where I belong, Emma said softly. I belong with David. The ceremony was set for 4 o'clock in the afternoon, in the gardens overlooking the lake. Emma had chosen the spot because it was where she had spent so many mornings reflecting on how dramatically her life had changed. Now it would be where she officially began her new life as David's wife. As the afternoon approached, guests began to arrive. The group was small, but diverse. Her childhood friends from Oregon, David's business associates, who had become genuine friends, and neighbors who had watched their unlikely love story unfold. Robert, resplendent in his formal attire, was serving as David's best man, while Emma's sister Sarah had flown in from California to be her maid of honor. Are you ready? Sarah asked, adjusting Emma's veil one final time. You know, when you called me 6 months ago to tell me you were getting married, I thought you had lost your mind. But seeing you now, seeing how happy you are, I've never seen you like this. Emma smiled, feeling calmer than she had expected. I'm ready. I've been ready since the moment I said yes. The music began, and Emma took her father's arm as they walked toward the makeshift altar that had been set up by the lake. The small gathering of guests rose to their feet, but Emma only had eyes for David, who stood waiting for her with an expression of pure love and wonder. He looked handsome in his dark suit, but what took Emma's breath away was the way he looked at her, as if she were the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. As she walked toward him, Emma thought about the journey that had brought them here. From that fateful night on the train to this moment of perfect happiness, her father kissed her cheek and placed her hand in David's, and Emma felt complete. The minister, a family friend of David's, began the ceremony with words about love, commitment, and the unexpected ways that fate brings to people together. David and Emma's love story began with an act of kindness, the minister said, smiling at the couple. It reminds us that love often comes when we least expect it, and that the most profound connections can grow from the simplest gestures. When it came time for their vows, David spoke first, his voice steady and full of emotion. Emma, 6 months ago, I was a man who had everything money could buy, but nothing that money couldn't. Then you fell asleep on my shoulder, and everything changed. You showed me what it means to be truly wealthy, not in dollars, but in love. In trust, in the simple joy of sharing life with someone who sees the best in you. Emma felt tears streaming down her face as he continued. I promise to love you not just for who you are, but for who you inspire me to be. I promise to support your dreams, to be your partner in all things, and to never forget that the greatest fortune I've ever earned is your love. Emma's voice trembled as she spoke her own vows. David, when I was exhausted and lost, you gave me more than just a place to rest. You gave me hope. You saw something in me that I had stopped seeing. In myself. You loved me when I was at my lowest, and you've helped me become the woman I always dreamed of being. She looked into his eyes, seeing her future reflected there. I promise to love you through every season of our lives. I promise to remember that our love began with kindness, and to let that kindness guide us through whatever challenges we face. I promise to be your partner, your friend, and your greatest supporter for all the days of my life. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, David's kiss was gentle but full of promise. The small crowd erupted in applause, but Emma was lost in the moment, in the feeling of being exactly where she belonged. The reception was held in the garden, with fairy lights strung between the trees, and a small dance floor set up on the lawn. Emma had insisted on keeping everything simple, but David had made sure every detail was perfect. The food was delicious, the music was perfect, and the atmosphere was filled with joy and love. During their first dance, Emma looked around at the faces of their family and friends, all smiling and celebrating their happiness. Can you believe this is real? She whispered to David. It's real, he said, spinning her gently. And it's just the beginning. As the evening progressed, Emma found herself thinking about how much her life had changed. A year ago, she had been struggling to survive, working 3 jobs and barely making ends meet. Now, she was married to the love of her life, surrounded by people who cared about her, with a future full of endless possibilities. When it came time to cut the cake, David surprised Emma by revealing that he had arranged for the local art gallery to display some of her dress designs. "I wanted everyone to see how talented my wife is," he said, beaming with pride. Emma was overwhelmed by the gesture. Her designs, which had been hidden away in sketchbooks for so long, were now on display for everyone to see. Several guests expressed interest in commissioning pieces from her, and Emma realized that her dream of becoming a fashion designer was finally within reach. As the evening wound down, Emma and David said goodbye to their guests. Her parents hugged her tightly, her father's eyes moist with emotion. "I'm so proud of you," he said. "Not just for finding love, but for staying true to yourself through all of this." Linda, her former roommate, was one of the last to leave. "I was wrong to worry," she said, embracing Emma. "You haven't changed who you are. You've just become more yourself. And David... He's lucky to have you." Finally, Emma and David were alone, standing together in the garden where they had just promised to love each other forever. The fairy lights twinkled above them, and the lake reflected the stars that were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "So, Mrs. Harrison," David said, pulling her close, "how does it feel?" Emma smiled, feeling the weight of her new wedding. "Ring on her finger, it feels perfect. It feels like coming home." They stood together in comfortable silence, both reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. Emma thought about the scared, exhausted girl who had fallen asleep on a stranger's shoulder, trusting him to keep her safe. She had given her trust to the right person, and it had changed everything. "What are you thinking about?" David asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "Just how different everything is now. A one moment of kindness can change everything. If you hadn't let me sleep on your shoulder that night, if you had just woken me up and sent me on my way." "But I didn't," David said, kissing her forehead. "And I never will. I'll always be here for you to rest on, Emma. That's what marriage is, being each other's safe place." As they walked back toward the house, Emma felt a deep sense of gratitude for the unexpected turns her life had taken. She had learned that love could come in the most surprising ways, that kindness from strangers could change everything, and that sometimes the best things in life happened when you were brave enough to trust. The scared girl who had borrowed a seat on a train was gone, replaced by a confident woman who had found her place in the world. Emma had gone from having nothing to having everything, not because of money or material wealth, but because she had found someone who loved her exactly as she was. Their wedding night was spent in the master suite of the main house, which was now officially their home. As Emma lay in David's arms, she marveled at how safe and loved she felt. This was what she had been searching for without even knowing it. Not just financial security, but emotional security. The knowledge that she was cherished and valued. "I love you, Mrs. Harrison," David whispered in the darkness. "I love you too, Mr. Harrison," Emma replied, smiling at how natural it felt to use her new name. As they drifted off to sleep together, Emma thought about the future that stretched ahead of them. She would continue to pursue her fashion design career with David's support and encouragement. They would travel together, build a family if they chose to, and create a life filled with love and purpose. The girl who had once fallen asleep on a stranger's shoulder had awakened to find herself in a fairy tale. But it wasn't the money or the luxury that made it magical, it was the love, the trust, and the unwavering kindness that had brought them together and would keep them together for the rest of their lives. Emma Carter Harrison had found her, happily ever after, and it was more beautiful than she had ever dared to dream. The end.